You're useless. A wife who can't give me a child is no wife at all. Those were the last words my husband said before he slammed the door in my face and locked it. For a second, I thought the sound of the door rattling in the frame was louder than his voice. But no, his voice, that sentence. It kept echoing inside my head long after everything went quiet. It still does, sometimes, like a broken record playing in the back of my mind when I'm trying to sleep. I stood on the front porch of our house in Dallas, Texas, holding a cheap suitcase and a folder full of medical papers that suddenly felt heavier than bricks. The Texas sun was starting to set, staining the sky orange and pink, but I didn't see beauty in it. It just felt like another reminder that one more day had ended and I had failed again. Failed as a woman. Failed as a wife. Failed at everything Mark said mattered. I waited foolishly for a few seconds. I thought maybe he would open the door and say, "I didn't mean it, I'm just angry, come back inside." That's what happens in movies. In real life, silence answered me. Silence and the distant sound of a lawnmower somewhere down the street. I knocked once, softly, then harder. "Mark," I said, my voice breaking. "Please, can you just open the door so we can talk?" Nothing. I pressed my forehead against the door and closed my eyes. This was the same door I had decorated with a fall wreath, the same door we had walked through after our wedding, laughing and half drunk on cheap champagne, making promises about our future children. I remembered how he had carried me over the threshold and how I had blushed when his mom joked, "First baby before the first anniversary." It had been 7 years. 7 anniversaries, no baby. "You did this," I whispered to myself, feeling the words stab me from the inside. "This is your fault." I stepped back and finally accepted what the silence meant. I looked down at my hands, the suitcase handle in one, the folder of lab results and fertility clinic receipts in the other. The papers were smudged from the sweat of my palm, the black ink of my name and my married name slightly blurred. I turned around and walked down the driveway. Our neighbors' houses lined the quiet street, all neat lawns and picket fences, families, children's bikes tossed carelessly on grass. Chalk drawings on sidewalks. Sprinklers spraying water as kids in swimsuits ran and screamed with joy. Little legs that worked, little lungs that laughed, little lives that existed. The kind of life I couldn't give him. Across the street, Mrs. Henderson was watering her flowers. She glanced at me, taking in the suitcase, the way I was walking like my bones were too heavy. Her eyes lingered for a moment, full of something between curiosity and pity, but she didn't say anything. I was grateful. I didn't think I could survive hearing someone say, "Oh honey, are you okay?" without breaking completely. I got into my old Nissan, shut the door, and just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel. I stared at the windshield and realized I could see my own reflection faintly in the glass. Messy hair, red eyes, mascara smudged under my lashes like bruises. "Look at you," I whispered. "You look crazy." My phone buzzed beside me on the passenger seat. For a moment my heart jumped, hoping it was Mark telling me to come back. It wasn't. It was a notification from the fertility clinic about an unpaid bill. I let out a bitter laugh. Even the clinic wanted more from me than I could give. I didn't cry right away. It's funny how your body sometimes delays the pain, like it's trying to protect you from absorbing all of it at once. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb, and drove without thinking, just following the familiar streets out of the neighborhood and toward downtown Dallas. We had talked about this day before, in whispers at night, after another failed treatment. What if this doesn't work? I would say, staring at the ceiling. Mark would sigh, annoyed. It has to work. That's not an answer, I'd reply quietly. He'd turn away from me in bed. We're not going to live as one of those weird childless couples people feel sorry for. I'm not doing that. Those words, at the time, had felt like a threat hanging over my head. Now I was driving straight into their consequence. The studio apartment I had found a few weeks earlier was on the far side of the city, in an older building with peeling paint and a flickering fluorescent light in the hallway. I'd rented it temporarily under the excuse of needing a place closer to the company where I had just started working as a temp assistant. The truth was, a small part of me had known for months that I might need somewhere to go. I just hadn't wanted to admit that even to myself. I parked, dragged my suitcase up the stairs, and unlocked the door to my new home. The apartment smelled like old carpet and cleaning products. There was one small window facing the alley, a kitchenette with a refrigerator that hummed too loudly, and a futon I'd bought secondhand online. When the door clicked shut behind me, the dam finally broke. I dropped everything on the floor and sank down with my back against the door, pulling my knees up to my chest. The first sob came out quietly, like a hiccup, but then another followed louder until my whole body was shaking. I buried my face in my arms and cried in a way I didn't even know I could cry. Like years of disappointment and injections and doctor's appointments and negative pregnancy tests were all demanding to be felt at once. "I'm sorry," I sobbed, though I didn't know who I was apologizing to. Mark? Myself? The children I never have? God? There's this cruel thing that happens when you hear the same criticism over and over again. It starts to sound like truth. Every month that went by without 2 pink lines on a plastic stick, Mark's words got colder. Maybe if you hadn't waited so long to have kids. Maybe if you took your health more seriously. Maybe if you weren't so stressed all the time. He never said, "Maybe this isn't anyone's fault." He never said, "Maybe we can still have a life even if it's just us." It was always on me, my body, my failure. I don't know how long I sat on the floor crying. The sky outside my small window turned from bright to gray to deep blue. At some point the humming of the fridge became white noise. My throat burned. My chest ached like someone had kicked it from the inside. Eventually, the tears slowed to a stop because my body was out of energy. I wiped my face on the sleeve of my shirt and forced myself to stand up. The world doesn't stop just because your heart does. There are still bills. There's still rent. There's still the job I had just started at a huge corporate building that made me feel like a child lost inside a maze of glass, chrome, and power suits. I walked to the tiny bathroom and flipped on the light. The mirror above the sink was cracked on the corner, splitting my reflection. It felt appropriate. I studied myself. Puffy eyes, nose red, lips trembling. My brown hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail I'd done quickly that morning before leaving for the appointment that turned into a war. My wedding ring was still on my finger, a physical lie wrapped around my hand. Slowly my fingers moved, twisting it, pulling it. The skin underneath was slightly pale from having been covered for so long. I held the ring between my thumb and index finger and just stared at it. So much weight in such a small circle of metal. "I gave you everything I could," I whispered. It just wasn't enough. I didn't throw the ring dramatically into the trash like in some movie. I was too tired for dramatic gestures. I set it down on the edge of the sink, next to a cheap bar of soap, like I might need it again. Like maybe all of this was temporary. Inside though, I knew something had ended. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay on the futon staring at the ceiling, listening to the neighbor's TV through the thin walls and the occasional siren outside. My body was exhausted, but my mind kept replaying scenes from the past 4 years like some cruel highlight reel. The first time we walked into the fertility clinic, the smell of antiseptic, the stiff chairs, the posters on the wall of smiling couples holding babies, all text and no reality. The doctor's voice, "We'll run some tests and see what's going on." Blood draws, ultrasounds, Mark squeezing my hand at first, making jokes about designer babies and getting it done. Then the first failed attempt, the second, the third. The doctor saying things like, Your ovarian reserve is lower than we'd expect at your age, and we're not seeing the implantation we'd hoped for. The way Mark's eyes changed a little with every appointment. Less patient, less hopeful, more resentful. You know, my family wants grandkids, he'd say, like they were a bill I was late paying. He never asked how my body felt, pumped full of hormones, bruised from injections, sore from procedures. He never asked how my mind felt, living month to month in cycles of hope and disappointment. I thought of the time I had told him quietly, maybe we should think about adoption. He'd scoffed. Raising another man's kid? No, I want my own blood. That sentence had lodged itself somewhere inside me like a piece of glass. My own blood, as if anything else didn't count, as if love alone wasn't enough to make someone your child. As the hours crawled past, another thought came, one that made my chest tighten. I had no idea who I was without the dream of being a mother. For so long, my life had revolved around cycles, ovulation, appointments, scheduled intimacy, and the constant question, what if this month? Now the question was, what if never? I turned on my side and looked at my phone on the crate I was using as a nightstand. Notifications glowed faintly on the screen, emails, promotions, some app trying to sell me something. I opened a social media app without thinking. Bad idea. Baby photos. Pregnancy announcements. Gender reveal parties. A friend posting, it finally happened, baby number 2 is on the way. With a picture of a tiny onesie. I scrolled and scrolled, feeding a wound that was already bleeding. Each smiling photo felt like a silent accusation. Look how easy it is for us. What's wrong with you? I dropped the phone on my chest and closed my eyes. I can't do this, I breathed. I can't keep living like I'm defective. There's a quiet moment when you hit a certain kind of rock bottom, where a question appears. Are you going to keep believing what hurt you, or are you going to start believing something else? I didn't have the answer that night. All I had was emptiness and the faint noise of someone's late-night infomercial coming through the wall. At some point, exhaustion finally pulled me under. When the alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., it felt like someone had thrown a bucket of ice water on my brain. For a split second, I forgot where I was. I reached out, expecting to feel Mark beside me, the familiar shape of our bed, the soft weight of our comforter. My hand met the rough texture of a thrifted blanket and the hard edge of the futon. Reality came crashing back. I sat up slowly. My face felt swollen. My mouth was dry. My chest still hurt. But there was no time to nurse the pain. I had a job to get to, not a dream job. Not a career I had imagined as a little girl. Just a lifeline, a temporary assistant position at a huge company downtown. It paid enough for rent and cheap groceries. It gave me something to do besides count all the ways my life had fallen apart. I made myself coffee in the tiny kitchen, the kind that comes in a giant discount container. It tasted bitter and burnt, but the warmth in my hands kept me grounded. You can do this, I muttered to myself, staring at the slightly crooked cabinets. One step. 1 hour, 1 day. I dressed in my best office clothes, which suddenly felt too tight around my chest. Black pants, white blouse, simple flats. I tied my hair back again and put on minimal makeup, trying to hide the evidence of last night's breakdown. No one at the office needed to know that my husband had thrown me out like trash. In corporate hallways, pain is something you keep hidden under blazers and polite smiles. Before I left, my eyes fell on the ring still sitting on the edge of the bathroom sink. I hesitated. Then, without letting myself think too much, I picked it up and slipped it into the back pocket of my bag instead of on my finger. A compromise between who I had been and who I might have to become. The drive to downtown Dallas was a blur of morning traffic, brake lights, and radio commercials. The skyscrapers rose ahead of me, glass and concrete glinting in the early light. Somewhere in one of those buildings, Powerful people were making decisions that would ripple through hundreds of lives. I was just one tiny piece in that massive puzzle attempt, easily replaceable. I pulled into the parking garage of the company where I now worked, a towering structure of glass and steel that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Inside, the lobby felt like another world: high ceilings, marble floors, sharp heels clicking, coffee cups in hand, people speaking in fast, confident tones. I clutched my bag a little tighter and forced my legs to keep moving. As I walked across the polished floor, my reflection followed me on the glass panels. For a moment, I barely recognized the woman staring back, small, tense, with a fragile kind of determination clinging to her like a last layer of armor. If you're listening to this, I can almost imagine myself telling whoever's on the other side of the screen right now, hit like if you've ever had to go to work with your heart in pieces, because that's exactly what I was doing. Smiling on the outside, carrying a shattered life on the inside. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and stepped into the elevator. I didn't know it yet, but somewhere in this building, a man I'd never met, a single dad, a CEO with his own scars, was about to walk into my story and challenge everything I believed about my worth. I arrived at the office trying to pretend my life wasn't falling apart. The hardest part wasn't the exhaustion or even the heartbreak, it was the fear that someone might look too closely and see all the cracks. People in offices like this move with a kind of effortless confidence, like their lives fit perfectly into their tailored suits. I felt like a mismatched button on a designer jacket, trying to hold things together but barely hanging on. I walked down the long hallway toward the temp assistant's corner, a small cluster of desks near the copy machines. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me, the sound sharp enough to make the headache behind my eyes pulse even harder. I took a seat at my desk and booted up my computer, forcing my fingers to move normally even though they still trembled slightly from a night of crying. My supervisor, Melissa, walked past with a cup of iced coffee and barely glanced at me. "Morning," she said, already focused on her phone. "Morning," I replied, my voice softer than I intended. She didn't notice, that was fine. I didn't want attention anyway. I wanted to blend in, do the tasks they gave me, collect my paycheck, survive. But survival gets complicated when your emotions sit just beneath the surface, like the thinnest layer of ice over deep water. Around 10 a.m., I heard two voices near the copier, two women who always seemed eager to discuss anything except work. I tried to tune them out, but a few words slipped through, sharp and familiar. "Some women just can't have kids. Imagine being married and failing at the one thing you're supposed to do. It's sad, but also kind of pathetic." My stomach dropped. My heartbeat shifted into something uneven and painful. I kept typing, pretending I didn't hear, but my vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. One of the women laughed. "Honestly, if my body couldn't do something so basic, I would just never get married, spare everyone the trouble." I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened, my chest burned. The air in the office suddenly felt too thick, too hot, too loud. I stood up abruptly, knocking my pen to the floor, and stumbled toward the hallway. I went straight into the nearest restroom and pushed the door shut behind me. The moment I locked the stall, my composure shattered. I pressed both hands against my mouth to keep from sobbing out loud, but the tears came anyway, hot and uncontrollable. Their words mixed with Mark's voice in my head like a cruel chorus. Pathetic, useless, failed at the one thing you're supposed to do. I slid down to sit on the closed toilet seat, leaning forward with my elbows on my knees, breathing fast and shallow. I didn't want to cry here. Not at work. Not in a corporate restroom with the smell of lavender soap trying to mask cheap disinfectant. But grief and humiliation don't care about timing. After a few minutes, I forced myself to stop. I wiped my face with rough paper towels and closed my eyes, whispering, "You're okay. You're okay. Just breathe. The words didn't feel true, but they helped slow the shaking in my hands. When I finally stepped out of the stall and approached the sink, my reflection hit me like a punch. Red eyes. Wet lashes. Mascara smudged under my eyes. Anyone who saw me like this would know. I splashed cold water on my face, took another deep breath, and pushed myself to look calm, normal, invisible. I pushed open the restroom door and walked straight into someone's chest. Oh, sorry, I said quickly, stepping back, reaching automatically to smooth my blouse, praying it wasn't someone who knew me. But then I looked up. It was him, Ethan Hunter. The CEO. I'd seen him once before from a distance, tall, broad-shouldered, sharply dressed, with the kind of presence that makes everyone else straighten up instinctively. People said he was brilliant, demanding, feared by most, and respected by everyone. He wasn't the kind of man who bumped into people. He was the kind who people moved out of the way for. Right now, though, he didn't move. And he didn't look annoyed or surprised. He looked observant. Too observant. His eyes scanned my face, not in a way that felt invasive or inappropriate, but in a way that felt like he was reading every emotion I had tried to hide. You okay? He asked. 2 words, that's all. But they were spoken softly, without judgment, without the clipped tone of someone asking out of obligation. I'm fine, I lied immediately. My voice cracked on the last word. He didn't believe me. I could see it in the slight tilt of his head, in the tiny tightening of his jaw. He didn't push, though. You work in admin, he said, not looking away from me. I nodded. Just temporarily. Name? I hesitated. Emily. He repeated it quietly. Emily. It hit different when he said it steady, grounded, like he was anchoring me in place. I'm sorry, I added quickly. I didn't mean to bump into you. I'll get back to. You don't need to apologize. Something about the way he said that made my throat tighten again. I forced myself to nod and walk away before I fell apart in front of him. The last thing I needed was to cry in front of the CEO. That would be career suicide. I made it back to my desk, trying to focus on my work. But for the rest of the morning, I felt his presence everywhere. And every time I walked through the hallway, I had this strange certainty that he noticed me before I noticed him. Around lunchtime, something unexpected happened. A small girl, maybe 6 years old, ran into the lobby holding a drawing. She looked like she had just escaped from someone's hold and was proud about it. She had curly brown hair pulled back into pigtails and wore sparkly sneakers that lit up when she stepped. She ran straight into the path of a man carrying coffee. The coffee spilled across the floor. The man cursed loudly. The girl froze, eyes wide, like she'd just broken the world. Instinct kicked in faster than thought. I rushed over, knelt down, and gently took her hands in mine. Hey, it's okay, I said softly. Accidents happen. Her lower lip trembled. He yelled at me. He just had a bad moment, I assured her. You didn't do anything wrong, she sniffled. My daddy says accidents don't mean you're bad. Your daddy sounds very smart, I said. A voice behind me replied, sometimes. I looked over my shoulder and there he was again. Ethan. He stepped forward, his expression softer than before as he looked at his daughter. Lily, sweetheart, are you okay? She ran to him and wrapped her arms around his leg. He bent down and kissed the top of her head. I spilled the man's coffee, she whispered. And the building didn't collapse, did it? He asked gently. She shook her head. Then I think we'll survive, she giggled quietly. Then his eyes shifted to me slowly, intentionally. Something unreadable flickered in them. Thank you, he said. It's nothing, I replied, but my voice wasn't steady. It wasn't nothing, he corrected softly. We held each other's gaze for half a second too long. My heart did an uncomfortable flip in my chest, like it wasn't prepared for this kind of attention, gentle, focused, patient. He stood and took Lily's hand. Come on, sweetheart. Daddy has a meeting. As they walked away, Lily turned back and waved at me with her small hand. I waved back, forcing a smile. But when they turned the corner, my smile faded. My chest felt tight again, but not from sadness this time. It was something else. Something unfamiliar. Hope? Longing? Fear of wanting something I didn't deserve. The rest of the afternoon passed strangely. Every time I looked up from my computer, I saw glimpses of him walking past glass conference rooms, talking to executives, checking his phone. Always composed, always calm, always carrying an invisible weight I couldn't name. And then near the end of the day he stopped beside my desk. Emily, he said, and just hearing him say my name made my pulse jump. Yes, I replied, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. Could you help with a project this week? I need someone organized and reliable. My mouth opened slightly in surprise. Me? Yes, you. His tone made it sound obvious. You're observant, detail-oriented. You don't rush. You notice that? He didn't blink. I notice a lot. I swallowed hard. Yes. I can help. His lips curved, not a smile, but something close. A subtle approval. Good, he said. I'll have the documents sent to you by morning. As he walked away, something inside me, something I thought Mark had destroyed, stirred. Possibility, warmth, a sense of being seen without being judged. When I left the building that day, the sunlight felt different on my skin. The city noises felt less overwhelming. And for the first time in months, I felt a tiny crack in the darkness, just enough for light to seep in. I didn't know it yet, but that day was the first step toward the moment a man I barely knew would look at me with unwavering certainty and say, "Come with me," and the broken pieces of my life would slowly start to rearrange themselves into something I never believed I could have again, a new beginning. By the next week, my life had fallen into a strange, delicate rhythm, one I didn't fully trust but couldn't help holding on to. I woke up early, still exhausted but a little steadier. I made coffee in my cheap little kitchen and whispered quiet promises to myself. Just get through today. One step at a time. And at work, things were different. Not easier, but different. I wasn't invisible anymore, not to him. Not to Ethan, and even though I didn't understand why, that shift alone made the office feel less like a battlefield and more like a place where I could breathe, even if just a little. He didn't treat me like an assistant. He treated me like a person. When he spoke to me, he looked directly into my eyes. When he asked a question, he actually listened to the answer. He didn't rush, didn't dismiss, didn't patronize. It was unsettling at first having someone treat me with quiet respect after living so long with someone who turned every conversation into a measurement of my failures. But the real difference wasn't in the way he treated me, it was in the way I started to treat myself. Little things at first. I stopped apologizing for breathing. I stopped flinching every time someone said the word children. I stopped holding my breath every time my phone buzzed. I wasn't healed, not even close, but I was no longer drowning. Just trying to swim again. The project he had asked me to help with kept us in close contact. He'd send detailed notes. I sent organized summaries. Sometimes we'd meet briefly in his office, which always smelled faintly of cedar and something clean, crisp. I was careful. I kept my distance. I didn't want him to see the mess behind my ribs. But sometimes, our eyes lingered just a second too long, and something inside me shifted, quiet, dangerous, hopeful. Then came Thursday. The day everything cracked open again. It started normally enough. Emails, phone calls, paperwork, a headache from the flickering overhead light no one ever fixed. Around 2 p.m., I went to deliver some files to the marketing department. On the way back, I heard someone shout my name across the lobby. Emily! I turned, and my blood turned to ice. Mark. My ex-husband stood there, hands on his hips, eyes burning with the same anger I knew too well. My throat closed instantly. The hallway suddenly felt too narrow, like the walls were inching closer. "What are you doing here?" I whispered, praying no one was listening. He gave a mocking laugh. "So it's true. You really are working here." "I asked you what you're doing here," I repeated, my voice small but steady. "I came to talk to you." "You blocked my number." Because he had kept calling after throwing me out, calling to blame me, accuse me, demand explanations I didn't owe. "We have nothing to talk about," I said firmly. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You embarrassed me. You walked out like a drama queen, telling people I kicked you out." "You did kick me out," he scoffed. "Because you're broken, Emily, and I'm not going to apologize for wanting a real family." The words hit me so hard I physically stepped backward. My eyes stung, my chest tightened. I felt everything in me collapsing again, like all the progress I'd made over the past days had been a fragile illusion. "Please leave," I whispered. "Oh, you'd love that, wouldn't you?" he sneered. "Pretending you're healing, pretending you're moving on, pretending some new guy is going to want you when you can't even mark." A new voice cut through the air like a blade, deep, calm, controlled. I didn't have to look to know who it was. My body reacted before my mind did. My shoulders straightened, my breath caught, my heart both eased and raced. Ethan stepped beside me, positioning himself between Mark and me with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need volume to be powerful. His tie was loosened slightly, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp and steady. "Is there a problem here?" Ethan asked, his tone dangerously level. Mark's bravado faltered for a half second. "This is between me and my wife." "Ex-wife," I said quietly but loud enough. Mark ignored me. "She's causing drama and I came to fix it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for your interpretation. I asked if there is a problem." "She's my responsibility," Mark snapped. "No," Ethan said, voice like stone. "She isn't." Something electric passed between them. A recognition of power, a silent warning. Mark scoffed, trying to recover his confidence. "Look, man, I don't know who you think you are. I know exactly who I am," Ethan replied. "The question is who you think you are, coming into my company, raising your voice at one of my employees." Mark blinked. "Your employee? Do you need security to escort you out?" Ethan continued. "Or are you going to walk out on your own?" People were staring now. Phones paused midair, whispers spreading like wildfire. My face burned with humiliation. My lungs tightened. Mark glared at me. "You really are pathetic, Emily," hiding behind someone else like a scared. Before he could finish the sentence, Ethan stepped forward, not aggressively, but with such controlled certainty the entire lobby went still. "That's enough," Ethan said, voice lower, colder. "Leave, now." Mark opened his mouth to argue, but something in Ethan's eyes, some steel, some shadow, made him hesitate. He turned back to me and spat, "This isn't over." Then he walked out. The moment the door shut behind him, the strength drained out of me like someone had pulled a plug. My knees wobbled. The world tilted. Breath refused to come. "Emily?" Ethan said, softer now. I shook my head, covering my mouth with my hand, trying not to break in front of a crowd. My vision blurred. The lobby felt too bright, too loud, too full of eyes. I need. Without a word, Ethan stepped closer and gently placed a hand on my back, not possessively, but in steady grounding reassurance. "Come with me," he said quietly, guiding me away from the people, steering me into an empty conference room. When the door shut behind us, the silence hit me like a wave. I pressed my hands to my face and felt myself unravel, choking on gasps I couldn't control. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're safe." I shook my head violently. "He shouldn't have come here. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. He always does this. He always..." stop apologizing. His voice was firm but not harsh. You didn't do anything wrong. I leaned against the wall, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor. The shame, the fear, the memories, they all poured out in messy, broken sentences. He thinks I'm defective, I whispered. He always said I was worthless because I couldn't give him children, and he's right. He's right. Who wants someone who... Emily. He crouched in front of me, eyes locked on mine with unshakable intensity. Don't finish that sentence. Tears ran hot down my cheeks. It's true. No, it isn't. His voice didn't rise. It didn't waver. It didn't pity. It simply existed with a certainty I didn't understand. You don't even know me, I whispered. I know enough, he replied. I know you're strong, caring, smart, and I know you didn't deserve what he just did to you. I let out a shaky breath. I feel like I'm always drowning. He shook his head. You're not drowning. You've just been carrying someone else's weight for a long time. His words hit me so deeply I felt them in my bones. Before I could respond, someone knocked lightly on the door, reminding us where we were. Reality intruded, sharp and unwelcome. I wiped my tears and forced myself to stand. I'm sorry, I said again before I could stop myself. He exhaled slowly. Emily, but I was already reaching for the door. I couldn't face him, not like this. Not when I felt like a broken mirror reflecting the worst parts of my past. I left the conference room without meeting his eyes again. And for the rest of the afternoon, I avoided him. Avoided the hallway. Avoided any reflective surface that might show my trembling expression. By the time I left the building, I felt hollow and heavy at the same time. My heart was bruised in places I didn't know existed. I didn't know it then, but that moment, my retreat, my silence would set the stage for everything that happened next. Because when you run from someone who actually cares, sometimes they come looking for you. And Ethan Hunter was not a man who let things go. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even lie down. I just sat on the edge of the futon, staring at the wall like it might give me answers. The conference room moment replayed in a loop in my mind, Mark's voice, the crowd staring, the humiliation choking me, and then Ethan's hand on my back, steady and grounding, his voice saying, "You're safe." It should have comforted me. Instead, it terrified me. Not because of him, but because of what it stirred inside me. A feeling I had buried for years, the possibility of being seen. And being seen was dangerous, so I made a decision. A cowardly one, maybe, but at the time it felt like survival. I emailed HR at 4:17 a.m., effective immediately. I resigned from my temporary position. Personal reasons. My hands shook after hitting send, but some twisted part of me felt relief. If I removed myself from the equation, Mark couldn't come back there. People wouldn't judge me. Ethan wouldn't have to deal with my chaos. By 7 a.m., I had already stuffed my few belongings into my suitcase again. By 7:15, I was pacing my tiny studio, heart hammering, telling myself this was the right choice. He doesn't need your life messing up his. You're a temp. You're replaceable. He was just being kind. But the lie tasted bitter, still. I grabbed my keys. I'd return the badge. Clear my desk before anyone else arrived. Maybe Ethan wouldn't even notice I was gone. Why would he? He was a CEO, I was nobody. The morning air was cool as I walked down the stairs of my building, but halfway down I froze. There was a black SUV parked in front of the entrance, engine off, windows dark. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, until the driver's door opened. And he stepped out, Ethan. His sleeves were rolled up like he had gotten dressed in a hurry. His hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd run his hands through it too many times. His expression hard to read, but intense landed on me the moment the door shut. I felt my knees weaken. My suitcase slipped from my hand and hit the concrete. Emily, My name and his voice did something to me, something that felt like both salvation and danger. What? What are you doing here? I whispered. He walked toward me slowly, steadily, like he was afraid sudden movement might break me. You weren't at work. And you didn't message. I resigned. My voice cracked. I couldn't stay after yesterday. I can't be that person who causes problems for everyone. I can't be— Stop. His word cut cleanly through my spiral. He stepped close enough that I could smell the faint scent of cedar and something warm underneath it, something like home. Yesterday happened because someone mistreated you, he said firmly. Not because of anything you did. I don't want to be a burden. His jaw tightened. You're not a burden. I feel like one, I whispered. My eyes burned again. Everywhere I go, everything I touch, it falls apart. He exhaled slowly like he had expected this answer. Then he said something quiet, but it struck me harder than any shout. You've been carrying pain that wasn't yours to carry. My breath hitched. It was mine. No, he said gently but unshakably. Someone else put it on you. And you believed it because you're kind. Because you want to do right. Because you try so hard to fix something that wasn't broken you. My knees almost gave out. I reached for the railing. He stepped closer like he was ready to catch me if I fell. I shouldn't be near you, I said softly. Your world is clean and controlled. Mine is a disaster. I don't want to ruin anything. You're not ruining anything, he said. If anything, you're the first thing in a long time that doesn't feel like a disaster. A small sound escaped me, half gasp, half sob. My throat tightened as tears filled my eyes, but he didn't look away. He didn't flinch or pity me. He just stayed. Emily, he said, voice steady, almost quiet. You don't have to run. I don't know how not to, I whispered. He looked at me for a long moment, something shifting in his eyes, resolve, maybe. Then he extended his hand just slightly, not touching me, but offering something invisible and real. Come with me. My heart stopped. Just stopped. Those 3 words echoed inside me with a weight nothing else had ever carried. Not a command, not a rescue, not romance, just an invitation. A step toward safety. Toward possibility. I don't know what that means, I whispered. It means you don't have to face this alone, he said. It means you don't have to go back to a place where you feel small. It means you deserve better than the version of yourself that man tricked you into believing. My chest tightened. A soft sob slipped out. I'm scared. His voice softened. So am I. That surprised me. Ethan always seems so composed, so in control. He continued, I'm raising my daughter alone. I make mistakes. I'm busy, distracted, guarded. But when I look at you— He paused, swallowing. I see someone who deserves gentleness. And I want to be someone who gives it. My tears fell freely now, warm on my cheeks. Lily's in the car, he added quietly. She wanted to come because she said she didn't get to say thank you for helping her yesterday. As if on cue, the rear window rolled down. Lily peeked out, smiling shyly. Hi, Miss Emily. My heart cracked wide open. I wiped my cheeks quickly and whispered, I don't know if I'm strong enough. Ethan stepped closer. Close enough that I could feel the warmth from his presence. Close enough that the world narrowed to just the 2 of us. You're the strongest woman I've ever met, he said. And you're allowed to be tired. Let someone else carry the weight for a while. I let out a trembling breath. The morning air wrapped around us, cool and quiet. Cars passed in the distance. A dog barked somewhere, but everything fell still. Slowly, hesitantly, I nodded, not because I knew the future, not because I felt healed, but because, for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I didn't have to walk alone. He reached for my suitcase and lifted it easily. Then he opened the SUV door for me, waiting silently, patiently. Lily beamed when I climbed in. I saved you a seat next to me. I smiled through tears. Thank you, sweetheart. When Ethan closed the door behind me and walked around to the driver's side, something inside me settled, not perfectly, not magically, but enough. Enough to breathe, enough to hope. Enough to believe that maybe I wasn't broken, just bruised. And bruises heal. As the SUV pulled onto the street, I looked out the window at my tiny studio fading into the distance and whispered to myself, "You're allowed to start again." And for the first time, the voice in my head didn't sound like Mark's, it sounded like mine. Before the car turned the corner, I closed my eyes and silently promised that if someone watching this story needed to hear it too, I'd tell them, you deserve love that stays. Love that chooses you. Love that doesn't measure you by what you can give, only by who you are. If this touched you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever felt not enough for someone who should have cherished you? And don't forget to like this story if it made your heart feel a little less alone. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one person, one invitation to change everything.